Build your very own idbox 3D printer. Go online now to buildidbox.com to discover how you can construct your very own high-tech idbox and print incredible 3D models. Advances in technology mean that 3D printing is no longer just a fantasy. The idbox 3D printer now allows you to create incredible objects in the comfort of your own home.
Mind the gap.
So, welcome aboard, commuters, and yes, I've gone out and bought a 3D printer. Right, so this 3D printer is, it used to be a part work that was available many years ago. Agostini have rebranded it under their ModelSpace brand. So what happens is that you receive a pack every calendar month. You get either 3 or 4 issues with each pack, and then you build it from there. Now, a lot of this is actually outdated. For example, the software that they have to support it is actually no longer supported in the 3D printing world. So I've had to make adaptations to it. By that I mean that I've had to download some different software. So to be honest with you, the series guide and the articles in the magazine is completely irrelevant. However, the 3D printer is 100% relevant. So the first thing I do is I check through the parts, and there is actually a damaged part. Let me find the part. There it is on the screen. It must have got caught in transit. Now, in this particular case, it's actually one of the reinforcing plates. It's cracked off, and what I actually did was I super glued it together with some really strong gel super glue. I decided that I would carry on with it. If it was from pack 2 or pack 3, I would have just instantly said no, not having it. Contact Agostini and say, can you replace the part, because obviously it's not my fault. However, because this comes from build number 1, I thought, right, well, I'll give it a go repairing it so that we can at least get the printer underway. And to be honest with you, I think I've done a good enough job, because this reinforcing plate, it just essentially holds some nuts in. So the first part is actually very tedious, quite boring, but obviously very essential, and that is to remove the protective layer from the front panel. And it's this, normally you get pieces of paper like protective films and things, and you just get the corner off and off it goes. This is quite thin paper, and the glue that they hold it on with is, as you can see, it's a bit of a struggle, but I do manage it okay in the end. So if you do this part, have a cup of tea, whatever chills you out, and just sort of take your time and get on with it. The faster you try to do this, the more little bits will rip off, so just take it nice and gently. Okay, and once you've done that, you then need to remove the protective brown paper from the 2 reinforcing plates. And obviously I had to be very careful here, because one of them had been super glued, and that did affect the, it kind of stuck to the brown paper, but I managed it in the end. Okay, so the next stage you need to place an M3 nut into each of the slots. Now, I found this very tricky, so what I actually did was I placed in the screw into the nut, not enough so that the end was showing through the other side, but just enough just to catch the nut, and then carefully place holding the screw, place the nut into the slot, and then it does say later on that if you may find that they move out when you move the plates. This was certainly the case with my build. If this hinders this construction, you can secure the nuts in position with the plates with a small amount of PVA glue. Now I would recommend using PVA glue. I will confess I didn't have any PVA glue to hand, so I actually used a tiny dab of super glue, and the reason I used super glue was it's a very, very strong bond using very, very little, and all it really does is it holds that nut into place. I actually found that I placed the nuts, one of the nuts, in slightly the wrong position, and by putting, once I actually begun to assemble it, because the screw wasn't quite lining up, it kind of pulled the nut back, breaking the super glue. In actual fact, all the PVA glue or the super glue does is it holds that nut into place until you're constructing. You've got a lot of placing things into position, turning them upside down, and then screwing them in. It's that action of turning them upside down combined with gravity that makes them want to fall out. Once they're actually in place, it's quite a simple but clever design, in that the tabs and the screws are all holding things, and every component kind of holds each other in place. If one of them fails, the rest of them fail, and it doesn't matter which one fails. So this is the kind of comedy part. This is quite long and slow, and this is placing the 6 nuts into position, and all I did was place a little tiny dab of super glue. You can use a cocktail stick. In this particular case I used super glue that came with a brush, and it's very, very simple. The worst that can kind of go wrong here is that you could get some super glue onto the plastic, onto the perspex, which could hinder the look, but it certainly wouldn't affect the performance of it. Okay, so stage 3, you need to position the table base so that there's a groove. It does explain this in the magazine, and the top tip I can give you, probably this is going to be for the entire build, find about 4 or 5 points of reference with diagrams, because many of these parts look very, very similar. If you get sort of 6 months down the line and you find you've got one piece in the wrong position, it's an awful lot of work to undo it. So there is a groove on this particular piece which you'll put on the top right. Again, study the diagram, study the piece, and then everything should be fine. You then take the reinforcing plates and you place those onto the table base. There is a specific place to put them. Unfortunately, my lamp was a little bit bright here, so it's quite difficult to see. But once you've got them in, you then need to turn that plate upside down, holding the reinforcing plates. This is why we've screwed the nuts in, so that they're not falling out. And then what you need to do, excuse me, is taking 6 screws, placing a washer on each screw and screw them in. Now, this magazine does stress over and over and over again about do not over tighten the screws, because the acrylic can crack or break. It can be repaired using adhesive, but it's much simpler not to crack it in the first place. I've received advice from someone before that's tried to build this that have said it's very cheap, and it breaks very easily. I'm going to be honest with you, I found that if you treat this with love and respect and a little bit of common sense, it's actually quite a good build. Now, I'm going to show you screwing some of these screws in. However, I found a tip later on, before I finished the 6th one, but after I did the first one, and I think it's a really good top tip that will help prevent you from over tightening and cracking the acrylic plates. Okay, so here's my top tip. When you place the screw in, you see that just take the weight of the screwdriver, let the screwdriver just go very gently. Place the plate on something that's got quite low friction, such as the magazine, and then the plate will turn when it's in enough. You see there that just the weight with the screwdriver. Hopefully I'll be able to do that again. So what we do is we carefully place the screw in. We turn very, very light force, just enough to turn the screw. And then once it reaches the point that it can go to, you see there, we can actually spin that plate on the magazine. And that is in really firmly. And there's no way you can crack the acrylic plate if you do it that way. Okay, so that's it guys, I'm afraid, for part 1, and I've got to admit that was a really good part 1. Normally with part works, part 1 gives you quite a lot of material, not necessarily an awful lot to do. This is completely different from my other builds. It is quite technical, it is quite intricate, but I actually enjoyed it. Obviously, because it comes in pack form, I'm able to look at issue 2 and 3 in advance, and I can't see it slowing down too much. Sometimes with part works, you might get to sort of issue 3, and there's, you know, you've got all your money's worth in issue 1, and it's like the company's making up for it in issue 3. This is quite different. There's lots to do, and it is quite intricate. Okay, so now it's actually time to rate the issue, and the first rating I will give is for the overall look and feel, which I will give an 8, and the reason for the 8 is, just like all issue 1s, it looks absolutely fantastic. However, because it comes in a pack rather than an issue, I did feel all the parts were just thrown into the box without too much care. And then of course you did get that broken part, which would kind of confirm that to me. The build time was over 30 minutes, although I do suspect that that was mainly because I was building it on Twitch, because I do the live builds on Twitch sometimes. There weren't anything supplied to help. It tells you need a screwdriver, but it doesn't actually come with the screwdriver. But that's fine. So the build time was over 30 minutes, so that's a 10 out of 10. The instructions I did like. I felt the instructions were bordering on over explaining things. However, there weren't so many instructions that it made it confusing. Obviously I build things, I have a slightly technical mind, I can understand things, so for me personally, I could get away with less instructions. However, if you're a sort of small to sort of youngish child, perhaps building this with your father or a family member, you may need those more instructions. So I will give it a 10 out of 10 for the instructions. Now the parts, there aren't many parts, however they're big parts, so I'm going to use the same scoring system that I use for the Harley Davidson. Because they're big, important, chunky parts, I'm going to give 2 points per part. So with the front panel, 2 reinforcing plates and a table base, and then 3 packs of screws, it does get 10 out of 10 because there are exactly 5 parts. Although I am a little bit disappointed that you receive a part that you don't actually need. Maybe they could save that for a later issue, I don't know. And there was one problem, which was being that small part that had broken, although I did manage to repair it. So that's a 9 out of 10, scoring issue 1 with a very solid 94%. So the next video will be issue 2. If you've enjoyed this video, leave a comment. In fact, if you didn't enjoy the video, leave a comment. Tell me why you didn't enjoy it. Maybe there's ways that I can improve it in the future. So a jolly good build there. It looks like it's going to, not only is it fun to build and it looks nice, it's actually going to turn into something useful. This time next year I should be able to 3D print my own figures to paint, spare parts for things, or maybe just make my own inventions. So who knows, maybe this is the start of Penny being the evil genius. Okay guys, take care, see you again.